In 2007, Nokia sold more phones than every other brand on Earth, combined. 6 years later, it was gone. No war, no scandal, no bankruptcy. Just a slow, quiet refusal to believe the world was changing. This is the rise and fall of the company that once held the entire world in its hands. Nokia's story begins not with a smartphone, and not even with a phone. It begins in 1865 beside a river in southern Finland with a paper mill. A mining engineer named Frederick Idestam built a wood pulp factory near the town of Nokia, and that factory became the seed of what would eventually become one of the most valuable companies in the world. For its first century, Nokia was an industrial company. It made paper, rubber boots, and cables. Strange as that sounds, it was those cables, and the technology behind them, that quietly pulled Nokia toward telecommunications. By the 1980s, Nokia had started making radio phones for the Finnish military. And something clicked. The company began to see a future that almost nobody else could see yet. A world where ordinary people would carry phones in their pockets. In an era when most people thought mobile phones were a toy for the rich, Nokia bet everything on mass market communication. And for a while, that bet paid off beyond anyone's imagination. The 1990s were Nokia's decade. Under CEO Jorma Ollila, the company made a radical decision: sell off everything else, the paper mills, the rubber boots, the television sets, and go all in on mobile phones. It was one of the boldest corporate pivots in history. And it worked. Nokia released phone after phone that people genuinely loved. The 2110, the 6110, and then in 1999, the phone that would define an entire generation, the Nokia 3310. Nearly 130 million units sold. A device so durable, people still joke that it could survive a nuclear war. By the year 2000, Nokia was the most valuable company in all of Europe. Its market cap hit $250 billion. In Finland, a country of just 5 million people, Nokia accounted for nearly 4% of the entire national economy. It was not just a company, it was a national symbol. At its peak, 1 in every 3 phones sold on Earth was a Nokia. Think about that for a moment, 1 in 3. But even at the height of its power, cracks were forming. Here is something that almost nobody knows. Nokia engineers actually developed a touchscreen smartphone prototype as early as 2004. They saw what was coming. They built working concepts of devices that looked remarkably close to what Apple would release 3 years later. But the prototypes never made it out of the lab. Why? Because Nokia's internal culture had calcified. The company had grown so large, so bureaucratic, and so afraid of cannibalizing its own best-selling products that bold ideas got buried. Middle managers killed proposals. Engineers grew frustrated. The people closest to the future couldn't get anyone at the top to listen. And so Nokia doubled down on what it knew, hardware that was good enough, while quietly ignoring the revolution that was building right in front of it. That revolution had a name, and it arrived on January 9th, 2007. When Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and unveiled the first iPhone, the reaction inside Nokia was dismissal. Nokia executives publicly called it a niche product. Too expensive for most consumers, they said. No physical keyboard. Battery life was poor. Nokia had sold more phones in a single quarter than Apple had ever sold in its entire history. What Nokia missed, what they catastrophically failed to understand, was that the iPhone was not just a better phone. It was a new category of device entirely. It was a computer in your pocket. And in that world, Nokia's greatest strength, its hardware manufacturing, was almost irrelevant. The real battle was now in software. And Nokia's software, called Symbian, was a disaster. It had been built for a different era. Developers hated working with it. Consumers found it frustrating. While Apple launched the App Store and created an entire ecosystem that locked millions of users in, Nokia was still trying to fix a codebase that was beyond saving. In 2011, Nokia made one last desperate move. It partnered with Microsoft, replacing Symbian with Windows Phone. The partnership was deeply unpopular internally. Engineers left, morale collapsed, and Windows Phone never captured the market the way anyone had hoped. By 2012, Nokia's global market share had fallen from over 40% to less than 5%. And in September 2013, Microsoft bought Nokia's phone division for just $7.2 billion, a company that had once been worth $250 billion. Gone in 6 years. So what really killed Nokia? It wasn't the iPhone. Not exactly. Researchers who studied Nokia's collapse from the inside identified two things that doomed the company: fear and denial. Fear, because Nokia's middle managers were terrified of delivering bad news upward. In a culture where success was celebrated and failure was punished, leaders heard only what they wanted to hear. Problems were hidden. Timelines were faked. When engineers said the software wasn't ready, executives nodded and shipped it anyway. And denial, because the people at the top genuinely could not believe that Nokia, the dominant force in mobile for 2 decades, could be undone so quickly. Arrogance dressed itself up as confidence. The tragedy of Nokia is that the talent was there, the technology was there, the resources were there. What was missing was a culture willing to be honest about its own weakness. That's a lesson that goes far beyond mobile phones. The story, though, doesn't end in 2013. Nokia didn't disappear. It shed the phone business and rebuilt around what it had always been good at beneath the surface: networks and infrastructure. Today, Nokia is one of the world's leading providers of 5G technology. The Nokia Bell Labs division has produced more Nobel Prize-winning research than almost any other institution on the planet. It is a different kind of Nokia. Quieter, less famous, but still here. And the phones? A company called HMD Global licensed the Nokia brand and brought it back. Simple, durable, affordable phones. The kind Nokia built its original reputation on. The Nokia 331, even got a relaunch. Because some things refuse to die. What we can learn from Nokia is this: it is not enough to be the best at what you do today. You have to be honest about what tomorrow demands. The companies that survive disruption are not always the ones with the best technology. They are the ones with the courage to question themselves before the market does it for them. Nokia had the world, and it lost it. Not because it stopped trying, but because it stopped listening. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, hit subscribe, because next episode we're going inside another empire that ruled its world until it didn't. I'll see you there.